All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Tommy Joyner Radio Show. This is episode 5 of the Productized Me edition. With me today is my good friend, Toby Lyons, who runs a company called Lyons.com, where he helps business owners implement predictable revenue through outbound marketing services. I'm super glad to have Toby with us, not only to talk about his own journey in building his own productized service business, but also to help you guys out with some simple tactics associated with implementing your own strategy to generate more outbound leads for your company. So Toby, welcome.
Brilliant, man. Thank you, Tommy. Thanks a lot for having me on.
Awesome, man. Well, if you wouldn't mind telling the people a little bit more about your background and some of the stuff that you're up to at Lyons right now, I think that's a really good place to start.
Sure, yeah. So I started working in the startup world about 3 years ago, mainly in the SaaS industry. So before that, I was setting up a non-profit organization that was to connect travelers and tourists where they travel with local educational charities. Like any sort of story right at the beginning of your journey, I think I needed to take a bit of a step back. I didn't have that commercial experience, so wanted to get into the startup world to learn a bit more before going back into sort of non-profit. So I started in a SaaS company as doing a bit of a generalist role, then got into marketing, content creation, a bit of product stuff, and then customer service. But I only really sort of found my niche when I got into sales and sales development. So I came into this SaaS company that needed help getting more leads right at the top of the funnel. I looked at their process, started taking it over, and actually, I don't know, I started getting really frustrated with the way, A, they were doing things, and B, seeing the sort of general emails that you get through on a daily basis. You know, those sort of general, non-personalized emails, you know, hey there, I would love to connect with you. I see these sort of cringeworthy buzzwords that you see. I see synergies between our companies. I think I can help you overcome your challenges and reach your goals. Drop in a calendar link, you know, let's connect. Having access to a CRM and seeing the sort of CEO in this company, all the way to the operations guy, all the way to sales development, seeing across the board, you know, on LinkedIn and via email, all these sort of emails that are so generic. And actually they had quite a generic process as well. So I sort of took a step back and decided it would be a good idea to start really trying to personalize like the emails. And doing that at the beginning and doing it in a small way really started to see the metrics go up, you know, the open rates, the click rates, the reply rates, and eventually the meetings. I think they're in SaaS IoT, and I think the sales cycle is quite long. But what we're seeing is loads of meetings and lots of people, you know, getting their pricing in and moving people along the deal stages. Around that time as well, I sort of felt quite undervalued in that company. I was like, I need to find a way to develop a framework, develop a system that I can actually use this process to help other companies. So left the company at the end of last year, started Lyons in the beginning of 2019, and here we are.
Awesome, dude. Really appreciate that breakdown. In terms of, I guess if we could start like a little bit more in terms of like the what it's been like trying to build your own productized service, and then we can jump into some more of the strategic approach that you take to help other businesses. So like, how have you acquired clients? Like, what type of packages are you selling? What has it looked like in the formation of your own company?
Sure, yeah. So getting it clear at the moment, like I am a consultancy, so I run like a consultancy business at the moment. You know, speaking to you and looking into the productized service market, the aim is really to sort of get towards productized service. I really like it for many reasons, this whole model, and I'm sure we can jump into that towards the, you know, sort of end the conversation. But in terms of answering your question, you know, I like a service where you have to eat your own dog food. You know, like 90% of the clients that I get, I do my own process through, and that's how I get the leads, and then that's how I get the meetings and eventually the clients. I found it's also recently like really helpful and really valuable to sort of speak to people like you who are well connected, to get referrals. I recently, it was this week actually, signed a contract to partner with a sales agency based in Austria. So they help companies, to internationalize into German-speaking markets, and I think that's a really, really good, strong sort of partnership there. So yeah, basically, yeah, referrals, partnerships, and 90% of it is doing my thing, which helps actually, because that gives me the credibility when I reach out to people. I can actually show them the process that we go through in terms of the lead generation that I do. Yeah.
Cool, man. One of the reasons that I asked that as well, like a lot of the audience is going to be able to relate to either being in a stage where they're still kind of a freelancer or running a consultancy of their own, and they dream about starting a productized service. And there's a lot of challenges that come along with that, which we can get into as well. But regardless, the services that you offer through your consultancy, this is like sort of the meat and potatoes of this episode in terms of like what's going to be really valuable for these people watching. Can we talk a little bit about the strategy that you, first of all, like talk about what you do for customers from like an outbound perspective, talk a little bit about, cold email, and then let's talk about some strategies that people could use to actually implement this themselves if they haven't done it before, or maybe some ideas they could use to improve the existing kind of lead generation system that they've got going.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So I like to start off when I sort of speak to my clients, I like to start off with the iceberg analogy. So at the top of the surface, you've got that small bit of the iceberg, and let's look at that as the end email or sequence of emails that you actually send out. But below, you've got this massive mass of ice below, and that's where really all the hard work goes in, below the surface. And I think there are two really important things which we'll get into. Is personalization and data collection. Those are the really important things. And actually, there's a bit of interesting research that the Harvard Business Review did recently. They said that 74% of B2B buyers, they demand a B2C-like customer experience. Okay, so that means it's no longer about sending these generic emails, because you're just not going to get anywhere if 74% of B2B buyers demand this sort of personalized service right from the beginning. And that's so important at the top of the funnel to really create that sort of personalized connection right from the beginning. And I think what runs completely against that is the sort of rise of the need to create more leads. At the same time, I'll give you another, there was this HubSpot article that I read recently that said 85% of, let me just get this right, 85% of businesses, without that, if they don't get 20 opportunities through a week, they don't reach their revenue goals. Okay, so there's this real big need in such competitive markets at the moment to generate those quality leads. What's happened? Okay, at the same time, we've got these automation tools. And you can see, we all have inboxes and LinkedIn. You can see these generic emails just being churned out or outsourced. And that sort of, it goes against the personalization. It completely runs against the grain. And so what I do is completely cut against that by having fully personalized emails sent out. And the trick is doing it at scale. So that's just a bit of background. I can, you tell me, I can go in like sort of bullet points into the actual process if you like, but.
Yeah, I think I would like to go into, first of all, just to define for the audience, like cold email or cold outbound outreach. It's basically like when you send a potential prospect an email or a LinkedIn message, sometimes even a Facebook message, when you reach out to them from an outbound way, most of what Toby does, correct me if I'm wrong, is through email, right?
Exactly, just email.
So Toby's focus is exclusively on the email channel, which is a really, really great place still to reach out to prospects if you do it in the right way. And that's just a little bit of background on what this outbound outreach actually is for those of you who are unaware. And the way that differs from spam is basically when you curate it and make it really personalized. So you can actually abide by all the spam laws in any country by doing it the way that Toby does, which he's going to get into a little bit more. when he tells us about how he personalizes these emails, or the approach that he takes when it comes to that.
That's exactly right, Tommy. Yeah. Okay. So there's a difference between sort of email marketing, which would be, I get this is right up your street, but you've got customers and you're trying to move them through the funnel and they've already signed up for something. Cold email. I like to not talk about sort of cold email, because by the time I've done all the research, obviously it's cold because the person doesn't know me, but by the time I enter into their inbox, I've done all the research, and I really sort of that's where it cuts through everything else.
Okay, cool. And like, what's your process look like in terms of like how you actually go about personalizing the email?
Okay, so the first and most important thing is to find the right database to suit your needs. Okay, there's no point
Let's start there then.
Okay, yeah. Okay, so because it comes down to segmentation right at the beginning. Okay, so find the right database that suits your needs. And this largely depends on your niche, because I work quite closely with SaaS companies. I find Crunchbase Pro is really good to really dig down into, targeting. And then you segment based on sort of criteria. So it should definitely be vertical or industry, but you can go much further when it comes to funding amount, size of company, location, where they're at, company structure, which you can do all the sort of research on LinkedIn and Sales Navigator. And then you've got to find indicators that would suggest the need for your service. Okay, so let's say because you just sold Content Pros, let's say if your content creation productized service, indicators could be, you're looking at companies, okay, let's look at their blogs. Do they have, it could be, an indicator could be poor quality content. It could be irregular posting, lack of authority. When it comes to me, I like to segment based on team structure. Do they have SDRs? Do they have sales development reps? What else? I then like to look at their sort of customers and who they're working with. And all this information is so readily available. Everyone likes to have shiny new websites, and it comes down to sort of doing that research.
Yeah, just interject real quick for the audience and the listeners, like, think long and hard about who you're actually going after and the questions that they have and the people that you would like to speak with that are ultimately going to make a decision associated with buying your service. Just put yourself in their shoes, and it makes it a lot easier to actually create some of the content that Toby's going to continue going into. But definitely identifying those people on the front end is really important. And the way that Toby explained how the types of data points that he's looking for the people that he goes after, and the ones that I would be looking for my previous business is spot on. So really, like, pay attention to that.
Great. No, that's good interjection. I couldn't agree more. So then it comes down, once you've got those sort of segmented customer lists, then it comes down to personalization. And I would say the most important thing is to take a good, long, hard look at yourself and your business. How am I providing value? What story am I telling? Okay, nowadays it comes down to, it's really hard to differentiate on sort of features and your product, because everything is quite sort of, everything's quite saturated nowadays. So it's not just the problems that you solve with the features that you have, it's about creating that connection with the customer. So it's about storytelling, connecting with customers on a personal level, and working out how you can sort of intertwine your story with the prospect story. Some of the questions that you could ask: what are their aims? What are their goals, challenges, fears, ambitions? Okay, and this comes down to splitting up even further into persona. And then also it's really good to look at, once you've got a vertical, especially like a high growth industry, then you could look at, what the trends are in that and see if you can leverage that in your emails. So personalization, I think it comes down to effective research and doing this at scale. If you're sending out even 100 emails in a sequence, so I like to do email sequences of about 7 per sequence. So if you're doing 100, then you've got 700 emails to send. You can't possibly, no one has the time to do this email by email. It's just not going to happen. So effective research at scale comes down to sort of working out what bits of information you need to find out about the company or prospects that you can use in your email that directly relates to your business offering. Okay, so like I said, for me, I tend to look at who the company is working with, what industries they're in, their value proposition, what sort of messaging on their website, and then I can then weave that into my story to actually tell the story of outbound lead generation and how I can help them win more of their customers at scale.
Okay. And
does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely. What's an I think one of the things that's really going to help people is like, so what's your thought on like what that first email should look like? Can you give us an example of like the text that you would use when you're reaching out to a prospect on that very first email? And then can you talk a little bit about like, obviously one of the challenges if you're still planning on reaching out to a fair amount of companies, you can't write each one of these emails individually. You have to have something that's like a little bit of a system. So how do you manage to still personalize while creating that system? And like, and then also like, what does this text look like, especially on the first reach out? Is that like a shorter snippet or is it a longer email? Like what is the text?
Sure. Well, just before the conversation, we talked about the 80-20 rule, and I really like to think about that when it comes to outreach. Okay, so it's not, while it's so tempting to keep on talking about yourself, it's about them. So it's about that research. So answering your question, the first couple of lines, and I think your first interviewee talked about this as well. He talked about that first couple of lines being really personalized. So what I look for is, I start off with something like, it's exciting, it's interesting, it's fascinating to see, read, or, hear about this type of recent company news. Okay. Let's think about when you receive an email, you can see the subject line quite clearly, but then you can also see the first bit of text. So it's exciting to read that or it's exciting to see that company name has done something. Actually, right from the beginning, shows that you've done your research and shows that you actually care about the company. Now, this can backfire, okay? Genuine connections, that's so important when it comes to making genuine connections. No one likes a sort of fake email, and it makes you kind of bristle when you get them. It shows that you've done maybe a little bit of research, but the sort of minimum. So does that make sense? The first couple of lines are really important. And then you can say something like, I see you're doing X, Y, and Z. And that X, Y, and Z comes down to the sort of industry that you're in. So I see that you're writing X amount of blog posts per month, going back to Content Pros. Maybe it's just a short question. Do you need help writing, or do you need help with, and then your service? And then I say maximum 2 lines in the first email about you. No one wants to hear about you. They want to hear, mirroring is such an important technique when it comes to sales. I really recommend this book by a guy called Chris Voss, who writes Never Keep the Change or something like that. It's a negotiation book, and he really talks about the importance of mirroring. Sorry?
We'll get it in the show notes. I'll figure out what the title is. Yeah,
sure. So mirroring is really important, and actually doing your research. So once you've got, let's get back into the 7, I do 7 emails in one sequence. So it's not just one bit of information that you need to find. You can do all the research in a oneer, but work out 7 snippets of information that ties in your offering with the company's goals or challenges. And then once you've built out those sequences, then you can drop them in. Once you've built out those email sort of templates, then you can drop in the snippets of personalized information. And I think that's what gets you the sort of opens and replies, because you're telling a story throughout this whole email sequence of emails.
Right.
And each one when it gets an open, and I try and drop the bits of personalized information right at the beginning of the email, because again, they're going to see that the first bit of text. So, it's exciting to see at the beginning. Maybe the second email would be, I noticed you're doing X, Y, and Z, or I noticed you're working in such and such industries. Okay. So I would say the top bits of personalized information at the beginning. And then when it comes to the body of the email, work out how you can provide value in the body of the email. Okay. How can you jam off that beginning bit? I notice you're working in such and such industries. Oh, what I would do in these industries is X, Y, and Z. Okay. So then we've gone through subject lines. We've gone through the body of the email, and then the call to action is super interesting. And I want to throw this back to you. What do you, like, a genuine question, like, what do you think of someone emailing you cold, like out of the blue, and trying to get you on the phone immediately? What's your sort of reaction?
Yeah, I don't book a call. I'm turned off. I guess like most of the time I just end up ignoring that completely. And I don't know if that's because like I know what they're doing, or because genuinely because I used to do that, or because genuinely it doesn't work. But regardless, I definitely don't book a call.
There you go. Okay. And even just when someone suggests a time or drops in their link right at the beginning, so a Calendly link, I think it just kind of makes people bristle. So the call to action is one of the most essential parts of the email. And that for me should be short and snappy, but it's like, how can you don't want to get them on the phone to begin with because it just annoys people. Okay, so how can you provide that value? Okay, I see you're working in such and such an industry. Would you like me to send over a bit of research if you let me know your highest growth or your target industry? How can you sort of help them out? Because that essentially what we're trying to do with outbound email is start those conversations, spark those conversations. You're not trying to get them on the call. You're not trying to sell to them. And coming back to the difference between sort of outbound and inbound email or marketing, I think outbound, what I do is, or should be, quite inbound in the approach. It's not about selling, it's about providing value. And
Right.
I think that's what a lot of people get wrong.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point as well. And one of the things that I think you do extraordinarily well is like on the front end, your emails differ in that they're more intentional than a lot of the crap that you get, but that's almost not the most important part, because like you'll get some responses almost regardless of what that first email looks like, but then the follow-up, like once people do respond, it seems to me that that's like where it does make sense to spend time replying to each of those emails individually with high value kind of curated responses versus automated kind of text that you have ready to go.
I couldn't agree more. Definitely. Because it's such high value, starting these relationships. And I would actually say, when it comes to, I want to move on to sort of metrics. When it comes down to creating those relationships, a no becomes a good thing when it comes to targeting, because what we've done right at the beginning is we've got a segmented list. If you get a lot of no, when you take the time to personalize an email, you'd be surprised at how many people actually reply to you, whether it's a yes or a no. When I say yes or no, it means, positive, yeah, let's continue the discussion, or no. And then they actually, because you've taken the time, they actually tell you why, or you can actually probe a little bit more and say, okay, well, no, it's not a good time at the moment. We're already sorted. Actually, this isn't what we're interested in. And that gives you more data to collect. So then the next time when you go back to your database and try and segment another list, then you've got all that data from the beginning being like, okay, well, maybe I got this wrong. So let's tweak it a little bit. It's about those small tweaks to find those easy wins or early wins.
Awesome. Do you do a few different questions actually? Like maybe you can just address all these once, since they kind of have to do with metrics. Do you A/B test, and what do you A/B test? on what email do people generally respond, since you have a series of 7 that you usually send? And then like, what are some average open rates that people should shoot for? And what are the open rates that you're able to get through your approach?
Okay, so let's start with A/B test. Yes, A/B testing is really important. And then that comes down to finding certain variables in the campaign to test. So I'll give you an example. At the moment, I'm doing a bit of business development in the enterprise software market. I've started with seed round companies, Series A and Series B. Okay, and I can see a clear interest in Series A at the moment compared to seed and B. And this is at the moment. So then what I would do is then double down on this and widen the search, because I've got quite a narrow search when it comes to Series B. I'm going after US companies at the moment. But that has been really useful. And I would actually say, I don't currently use it at the moment, but I'm looking to use it more because I've heard it's really good. Mailshake is a fantastic A/B testing tool.
Nice.
When it comes to outreach. Could you remind me of the second question?
Yeah, I kind of threw a lot at you. What email do people generally respond once, like in what part of the series, or does it, because you send 7 emails. So maybe talk about why you send 7 and then when you get the most responses throughout that series.
Sure. So when I first started off in the SaaS company that I was telling you about right at the beginning, we used to send just 2 and then a breakup email. And sometimes we get some good response on the first one because it was so personalized and it took so long to do. But then after that, the second one was a generic one, and then the breakup didn't really do much at all. And I read this bit of research recently, and there was I'll find the link and then you can drop it in the notes afterwards. But I think building out, if you think about the typical marketing funnel, you got awareness and you got consideration, then moving them down the funnel in terms of actually converting them. It's exactly the same when it comes to outbound email, outbound cold email. So there's this bit of research that said 50% of the replies and meetings this person got, it was a very comprehensive bit of research, came after email 4. And so actually I'm finding towards the end, again, if you personalize the first one and they get more and more generic along the way, then you're just, I don't think that's going to work. So personalizing all the way through at scale is important. And actually, I'm finding the sort of from email 4 to 7 to be some of the highest opens and the most replies, because people are like, oh wow, this guy, actually when it comes down to it, it's so personalized that the cadence is really important as well. You don't want to annoy someone sending an email a day, but when people carry on reading these emails, they're like, well, this guy actually really cares about my business. Like everything he's talking about is completely on point. And so I am actually, because everyone's busy and you understand that, I'm actually going to try. Sometimes I've gone up to 9. And then I think the use of humor and caring about not wasting people's time is really important as well. Sorry to keep bothering you. Do you think I should speak to X, Y, and Z rather than you in the business? And then that bit of research, like at the end, if you drop that in, and that's also personalized, because then you can go on LinkedIn and find out the different personas in the business. I think that's like I said, that bit of research has really opened my eyes. Still learning from these resources out there.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think that's really important to keep in mind as well, is like, a lot of people half-ass this stuff. So if you're going to do it, make sure that you do it and do it thoroughly, I think is like one of the big takeaways that I've gotten from speaking with Toby and obviously through our interviews here. What do you say to those people who are, because there's a lot of people that just aren't privy to like outbound marketing in general. They feel like anything that you do from an outbound perspective is spam. How would you recommend that people get over those challenges, and like what's your philosophy on that?
Yeah, I completely agree. And this is why I mentioned previously that outbound is the process of directly hunting or going after some prospect or account. But in an inbound way. So it does come down to providing value. And when you provide value to someone on a personal level, then people actually really care. And so I'd say to those people, the challenges that people face is time, doing the research and learning how to do the research at scale. And depending on the size of the company that I work with, really for me, the argument that I use for definitely small companies is like, I help busy small teams that just don't have the time to do this. And then larger teams, they might have a couple of sales development reps, but they're graduates and they might not know the process as well. So I really help with the process. So it is, I would say to those people, it's about finding that process, developing it, and using the metrics to be able to A/B test, capture all that data, and then find the way forward when it comes to targeting certain industries and personas.
Right. So I guess what I would say as well, and that's a really good point, I appreciate you breaking it down like that, is like, if you're afraid of spamming people through LinkedIn messaging, Facebook messaging, or emails, whatever, I mean, it comes down to your approach. If you're spamming people, then yeah, that's like your problem. Like, but if you're creative and you're approaching people in a way that you would appreciate being approached, then it's an entirely different game. And it's clearly really effective. It's like one of the most effective ways that you can set up a predictable lead gen system for your business, especially with a service-based business, which is what a lot of you guys have. So like, I really encourage everyone to try and set up some sort of predictable revenue system that has this, because I mean, it can make a big difference if you're set up a system that's guaranteed to deliver you 5 to 10 customers a month through this. And it's really possible. And I think a lot of people have to kind of suspend their disbelief when they start this to kind of get an understanding that this type of marketing actually works. Do you see some of that too?
I completely agree. And what this Harvard Business Review, I couldn't, that's always in the forefront of my mind, doing business development for smaller companies. And if you're freelance as well, it's sometimes a bit soul destroying, but keep that in your mind. The majority, 3/4 of B2B buyers expect a personalized service right from the beginning. And like, literally full stop, that's it. But like, you have to provide that at this time.
Yeah, that's wild. And that's actually a really good point as well. Is like, people talk about like the difference between B2B and B2C. I think sometimes like B2B customers, in terms of prospecting them, it's like easier because they're used to buying and selling things as well, but there's still people at the end of the day. So like, people want to be treated like people. They don't just want to be treated like another transaction. So regardless of whether or not you're going after business owners, you actually have an advantage. Like, they're used to being sold to, so they're going to be more receptive to you because of that. They're probably not just going to say like, get the hell out of here, as some people in the B2C space would. But if you do that, they're more receptive. Plus, if you do it in the right way, they're going to be extra receptive, and you're going to stand out from all the other schmucks out there trying to sell them something.
Exactly. Yeah, that's exactly it.
Awesome, man. So let's talk a little bit about like people who haven't implemented this. There's a lot of people that either have, are struggling to kind of make the transition from consultancy to productized service, or that have already started their productized service, that they're pretty much still reliant on like referrals. And that's like the only way that they're really building their business. Like, let's say I don't have anything implemented in terms of an outbound cold email strategy. Like, how do I get started? Like, what do I do?
Good question. So, I mean, it comes back to finding the right database when it comes to productized service. I mean, I guess you can provide value there. I guess that's where the listeners are going to be interested to find what sort of companies would need a productized service. But yeah, find that right database and start really small. Okay. It's really surprising, and I really enjoy doing it that right at the beginning. What you can do is find that really small segment and start testing. Okay. You'd be surprised how many people who say, well, I'm like, what kind of customers do you need? And they're like, anyone who needs a blog, anyone who needs this sort of sales help. So find that industry and create a bit of authority, work out who your referrals have come from, what industries they're in, and start there, because you've got a bit of leverage already. You've helped customers in a certain industry. Start there.
And
start small.
How would I put that database together? Like, what sort of resources could I leverage? You mentioned Crunchbase Pro earlier. Like, are there any other places people can go to like compile this data?
Yeah, Crunchbase Pro, and then literally if you're starting off small, then it's just Google Sheets. Just use Crunchbase Pro, put them into Google Sheets. I use HubSpot. I try and cut against the automation side of things, because right at the beginning, there's no point in systematizing anything or scaling anything unless you tested it first. Okay, so I use HubSpot, the sales starter, which is $50 a month. It's nothing, and that gives you all the sort of data and analytics that you need and the automation. Okay, so once you've got that and LinkedIn Sales Navigator to do your prospecting, then you can just input in fact, there's a really good tool that I found recently called Linked Hub. And Linked Hub, you connect it to a Google Chrome extension. And once you're on LinkedIn Sales Navigator and you found the right person, you can just Link Hub syncs the LinkedIn contact details. You just click the button and it uploads it automatically straight into your HubSpot account. Okay, so that takes away a little bit of the pain of doing manual data input. And once you've got there, and start off, I would say the magic number in order to collect enough data to really start digging into it, the minimum is 100. Okay, so once you've got 100 accounts or 100 people that you want to contact that are in your target market, then you start, and we talked about the personalization, building out how exactly am I helping it? What 5 or 7 points am I able to tie into the company's business? Okay, and then you can start cherry picking all those points from Google News, from LinkedIn, from the people's LinkedIn accounts, and then also on their websites, and then build out templates, put in that personalized bit of information at the top of each email, stick it in HubSpot, and you're good to go.
Awesome. That's a really good breakdown. I appreciate that. And I think the audience will as well. What about do you use Mailshake, or what am I going to use to send these out? I mean, I don't want to send them straight out from my Gmail, right? How do I do that?
So HubSpot CRM does it all for you. So that's how you can create the templates in there, and then you can connect them up via sequence and make sure you get the cadence right. What I like to do is, because the first email is going to knock the people's socks off. Okay, so the first email, what I like to do in terms of cadence, I would send the second one 2 days later, and then maybe the third one 3 or 4 days later. And basically the whole system, the whole sequence of emails runs over half a month, 2.5 weeks, let's say.
Okay.
And then just let that go. And then I think that leads nicely on into the HubSpot analytics. It's good looking at the high level analytics such as open rates, click rates, and reply rates, and going through each one individually. Open rates is obviously directly tied to subject lines, but then it's also tied to, it's exciting to see that first couple of lines that you would do. Okay, so if your open rates are low, then obviously you need to start tweaking that. What I do on subject lines, it really should be, we've passed the days of clickbaity subject lines, but enticing and personalized enough to be able to get an open. And so it should be a snapshot of the first email, really, whatever that is. And then open rates, click rates come down to either your signature at the end, so you've got your LinkedIn, if you're going to drop in a bit of collateral, so a case study. We've come back to early stage productized service people. If you're going to start right at the beginning, then perhaps you've got a case study of someone in an industry that you've helped, that could be really useful. But then also it is about language, and that's what I think is really important, non-salesy language. So click rates, just because people aren't clicking on it, it might be the language leading up to that you might need to change around. And then obviously reply rates are measured on that as well. But then what I like to do is build up, and it's really important to build out those sort of personalized metrics and customized metrics based on the variables that you're going to measure. So let's say a variable might be 2 different personas. You might go after the CEO as well as the head of marketing. Okay. Then you can start measuring the replies when you get replies through. Okay, the CEO is replying 10 times more than the head of marketing. This means that I'm either going to double down on the CEO. Well, you could do simultaneously, you double down on the CEO and then you change the head of marketing messaging to suit that persona a little bit more and see whether both can go up at the same time. Does that make sense with variables? I think it's really important to sort of look at those variables right from the beginning and measure them.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's something that's really important for all the listeners to keep in mind as well. Awesome. And one quick thing that I asked you this earlier, but we didn't get to that point, just as an added piece of information. Once people embark on this process, what typical open rates do you get throughout the entire sequence with your methodology? And like, what should people shoot for? Obviously, they should shoot for what you get, because I know yours are much higher than the industry average. But like, maybe what's an average, what's good, and what should they strive for?
No, that's a good question. I was really happy to, and I've just been sharing my screen when I do some demos, because I got up to 92% recently, which I was super happy with. I would say that so that was good, but that was on a good day, like about 3 or 4 months ago, and I was super happy, and that was great. I would say an industry average is like, you've got to separate now, like the inbound marketing from the outbound. But so for outbound, I think industry average would be about 40 to 45.
Okay.
And I would say you're aiming for, now on an average of about 67. And that's good. I'm happy with that. So you should be aiming for, getting up to the sort of 60s, high 60s. And that's really when you're sort of you've peaked the interest right from the beginning.
Right. And then what about reply rates throughout the series?
Reply rates throughout the series, I can't tell you about an average, but I'm happy when it comes to about 20% reply rate, 25. I think that's good, because then that is throughout the whole email sequence. I can't tell you about the sort of individual ones. But that means we're getting conversations started. And then as a result, meeting rates get up to sort of 10, 12%. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So the actual scheduling a meeting is like 10 or 12%, which is phenomenal, actually. Because if you're thinking about if you only have to reach out to 100 people to get 10 or 12 people on a phone call, or book a demo with whoever it is, yourself or your salesperson for your service, hopefully you can close 10% of those, or even 30%, maybe a little higher. But even if you only close 10%, so you've got traction. You've got to the point where you can have a predictable revenue model in such a way that you're closing, 5 to 10 customers a month. And I think for a lot of listeners, that's sort of what you should shoot for starting out, because if you, assuming that you charge enough, 5 to 10 customers a month on a regular basis is really going to create like a really sustainable situation for your company. Absolutely.
Yeah, completely. And I couldn't state this enough. This comes down to personalization. It's that hard work to begin with. Think about that iceberg when you're, sometimes really, I'll be honest, I really enjoy it. It really suits my personality, that one-to-one type of sales, and working out how I can be, or, the company that I run can be the most valuable to the people that I'm trying to reach out to. But this comes down to personalization. And that's where all the hard work comes in.
And one thing that I'll say as well that you'll probably agree with is, like, if you not everybody's going to be good at this. Like when people hear personalization, like one of the things that I've seen, I mean, obviously people preach that, but there's a lot of people who seem to misinterpret that. And then like when it comes to personalization, they send you this email with just like all these random, like, what do you call them? Like merge tags? Like what's the thing that populates?
Yeah, I think it's called merge tags. Yeah.
Yeah, whatever piece of information that is like the variable that you're plugging into the email, it's just like it has their first name popping up in random places or like whatever, and then it just reads like super unnaturally. So if you're not good at this, get with someone who is a salesperson or has like a little bit of copywriting experience and have them review your series, because I mean you could definitely like mess this up and make it really awkward, and it's not super easy. Like the way that Toby talks about it, I'm just making that point because the way that you talk about it, this is your skill set, and everyone should try and implement something like this, but you're probably like not gonna get it right initially. Like you need to work on the copy.
100%. 100%. And that comes down to right at the beginning, working out sort of 5 or 7 points that you as a business can how you as a business can directly help the companies that you're going after. And after that, it's about cherry picking and finding those bits of information for the company and then putting them in. But I agree, it is a certain skill set, and certain people do get it wrong. And it's not just about putting in first name and company name and adding that, because people are really savvy to it. You know, you have to get the right balance between intertwining both your story and theirs, and finding that relevant information for them. And actually also that you can over personalize. This is where it gets, you know, over complex. Like people, it's a bit creepy when you're writing certain things that you have seen, I don't know, they've written a few years ago, that people are like, oh, well, yeah. I think it's important to stay relevant and on topic as well.
Yeah, I just brought that up because like at the end of the day, like my main point is like you should try and remain human. Like the whole point is like try and make it sound like an average, like fluid conversation. Like if it's awkward in any way, then it's gonna be just the same as if you were having an awkward conversation in person that's not gonna lead to anything. So you gotta
Exactly.
you gotta talk about interesting stuff in a way that piques the interest of the potential customer.
Absolutely.
Man, this is man. I think we've been talking for a while already, and we could go on for so much longer. But let's. I think there's a lot of good information here that people can take directly and implement into what they're doing for themselves. Are there any other like last bits of information in terms of how to help someone set up an outbound email campaign for the first time themselves that you would recommend? Anything else that comes to mind, or like a parting piece of advice?
I'll tell you what, I will drop, I'll tell you afterwards a couple of really, really good resources. We mentioned Mailshake. I would really recommend signing up to Mailshake. That is a fantastic resource when it comes to building out templates. One thing that I would say is that what I think kind of ruins industry to a certain extent is actually taking templates that other people have done and then just copying it. You know, make it yourselves and make it your own. So looking at these resources, and I have to say I dedicate a good, you know, it's such a learning process. I'm constantly changing. It depends on the clients that I work for, depends on the personas that I'm trying to sort of target. But take those templates, make it your own. And I'd say Mailshake is definitely a really good resource for that, because they take you through the elements of outbound email in a really good way. So yeah.
Okay, cool. So Mailshake being a good resource, and then I'll post some other stuff in the show notes. Where can people find you, man? Because like I think the other thing that I wanted to do is, like, I know how valuable your service is, and I know how good you are at it, and I know that a lot of people watching this might be potentially in need. So how can people get in touch with you to learn a little bit more about Lead Lyons and go from there?
Sure. So I'm having a bit of a revamp on my website at the moment, but please go on leadlyons.com, and then also give me an email on Toby@leadlyons.com as well. I'm more than happy to look through people's, such a valuable channel that you've made, and I'm so happy to help with people's email sequences. So give me an email, drop me an email. I will definitely reply. What else was I going to say? Yeah, I'm just really interested in what you're doing. It's really cool to have the opportunity to come on here, Tommy, because I think I'm looking more and more into turning what I'm doing into a productized service, and then B, looking into how I could be useful for people in this industry as well. It's an assumption of mine at the moment that the people who are quite sort of far stage, because I said before, I work with SaaS companies that are sort of 50 to 100 strong, all the way down to 1 to 10 man teams. But I think in the productized service industry, it's my assumption that at the end, when people have got it and they've scaled and everything's working, then they're all good. But I'm looking to see how valuable I can be to people at the beginning and just learn as much as possible. So I'm definitely going to be more active in the group. So thanks for having me on.
Yeah, awesome, man. We're happy to have you. And yeah, again, everybody, Toby Lyons from leadlyons.com, Lyons, by the way, leadlyons.com. I'll drop out the information in the show notes. If you have any comments or questions as well, drop those, and maybe Toby and I will get together again sometime in the future. But yeah, thanks so much for coming on, man. I really appreciate it.
Cool, man. Absolute pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
All right, brother.
Take care.